The unexpected delivery. The floating metropolis of Zenthura Prime was a jewel of the Orion expanse, its towering spires gleaming under the perpetual glow of 3 artificial suns. Suspended high above a gaseous planet, the city was a masterpiece of human and alien engineering, a hub of commerce, crime, and intergalactic diplomacy. It was the kind of place where a man like Dorian Kane could disappear, where his past didn't matter as long as his credits were good. Standing at the massive window of his luxury suite in the Celestial Mirage Hotel, Dorian appeared to be just another high-class visitor, admiring the breathtaking view of the city's drifting skybridges and luminescent towers. But behind the composed facade, his mind was working, analyzing, waiting. His wrist implant pulsed softly, a silent alert. The security network was compromised, just as he had planned. His fingers tapped a rhythm against his forearm, interfacing with the hidden display within his ocular implant. Someone was erasing records from the hotel's system, but they weren't subtle enough. Gaps in guest data, missing staff logs, incomplete transactions, sloppy work. Someone was covering their tracks, and that meant they had something to hide. Then came the knock. It was too soon. He hadn't ordered anything. "Room service, sir." Dorian's fingers twitched toward the concealed pulse pistol under his jacket. The voice outside was calm, professional, yet forced. Too controlled, too measured. He glanced at his security feed. A single hotel employee stood outside, pushing a covered cart. No weapons detected, no immediate threat. Still, something felt off. "I didn't request room service. A complimentary gift from management, sir. A welcome package for our esteemed guests." Dorian weighed his options. Refusing would make him stand out, arouse suspicion. Accepting meant stepping into someone else's game. He exhaled slowly, forcing himself to maintain the easy demeanor of a wealthy traveler. With a flick of his wrist, the door unlocked. The hotel attendant wheeled in the cart, his posture stiff, gaze avoiding Dorian's. And then he lifted the lid. There was no food beneath it, no delicacies, no wine. Instead, a woman knelt on the cart, bound in shimmering, intricate chains that pulsed with faint blue energy. Dorian's breath stalled. Her skin was violet, smooth and luminescent under the soft golden lights of the suite. Gold markings adorned her exposed shoulders and arms, symbols etched with precision, whispering of a history long forgotten by most of the galaxy. Her eyes, burning gold with vertical pupils, locked onto his, unblinking, assessing, fearless. Her attire was minimal. What little fabric there was flowed like liquid metal, shifting against her form as if alive. Her long obsidian black hair cascaded down her back, a stark contrast to the luminous chains binding her wrists and ankles. She radiated power, despite her position. This was no ordinary prisoner. "Your evening's entertainment, sir," the hotel attendant said, bowing slightly. "Shall I wheel her in?" The woman's lips curved, not in fear, but amusement. "Oh yes," she murmured. "Do wheel me in. I'm quite curious what kind of man accepts such an unexpected gift." Her voice was rich, regal, carrying an undercurrent of sharp intelligence. This was no courtesan. This was someone dangerous. Dorian's mind raced. The Kyrian people had disappeared 5 years ago. Their entire civilization vanished overnight. They were rumored extinct, wiped out in an event no one could explain. Yet here she was, a living, breathing Kyrian royal, shackled and delivered to his room like a commodity. The hotel attendant lingered for a beat too long. Dorian exhaled through his nose. "That'll be all." The man nodded stiffly and left. The door sealed shut. Silence. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The Kyrian woman tilted her head, watching him as if waiting to see what he would do next. Dorian crossed his arms, deliberately casual. "I take it you're not actually room service." She chuckled, a soft, melodious sound. "No, but I suppose I do come with certain services. Information, leverage, intrigue." Her golden eyes gleamed. "And a rather pressing problem." His gaze flickered to the chains. They weren't ordinary restraints. They were Centauri binding tech, which meant they were expensive and lethal if tampered with incorrectly. Someone went to a lot of trouble to get you here. Yes, she mused. The question is, why you? Dorian didn't answer. He was still trying to decide whether she was bait, a test, or an accident. But the moment he had seen her eyes, he knew this was no coincidence. His wrist implant buzzed. A silent warning. Someone had just accessed the floor's security systems. They weren't alone. Dorian's hand shifted toward his concealed pulse pistol, but the Kyrian woman had already straightened, her chains jingling softly. "Oh dear," she murmured. That would be Marvin's men, right on schedule. Dorian's muscles tensed. Marvin Haar, corporate overlord, information broker, and a man with far too many interests in things that weren't his. Marvin sent you here. Not quite. Her expression darkened. He had me delivered. Because if I survive the night, he loses everything. She rolled her wrists, testing the limits of her chains. You, on the other hand, are now officially involved. Congratulations. Dorian exhaled sharply. Great. His security feed flashed again. 3 armed figures outside his door, weapons ready. We may have to discuss terms later, he muttered, moving toward the cart, scanning the biometric locks on her bindings. Karen nobility, a missing empire, an assassination squad outside his door. This had escalated quickly. The woman smirked. Let me guess. This isn't what I signed up for. Dorian didn't answer. Because deep down, he knew the truth. He'd spent years searching for answers, hunting for clues about what had really happened to the Kyrian race. If she was telling the truth, this could be the lead he had been chasing for 5 years. Or it could get him killed. The lights in the suite dimmed. The security panel beeped. Someone was overriding the lock. Dorian swore under his breath. The Kyrian woman smiled, shifting on the cart like a queen on her throne. So, Mr. Kane, what's it going to be? Dorian moved, his fingers brushing against the biometric control on her restraints. She arched an eyebrow. Rain check on dinner, princess. The chain snapped open. The door burst inward. And then, all hell broke loose. Escape or die. The door exploded inward, the reinforced frame buckling as 3 armed figures stormed inside. Black tactical armor, helmets with opaque visors, compact pulse rifles trained forward. They moved with military precision, Marvin's best. Dorian didn't hesitate. He lunged sideways, yanking the Kyrian woman with him as pulse blasts tore through the air, melting through the suite's polished walls. A single hit would be enough to disintegrate bone. The woman, Kira, as his intel implant had just identified, didn't waste time. The moment her binding chains collapsed, she rolled off the cart, her body twisting midair, movements impossibly graceful. Dorian saw a flash of metal in her hands, a weapon, or maybe something worse. The lead attacker advanced, silent and ruthless, his weapon tracking them through the room. Dorian snapped up his pulse pistol and fired. The first shot hit home, slamming into the mercenary's chest armor, sending him staggering. The second shot, a headshot, would have ended him, but the armor's adaptive shielding absorbed the impact. Dan, they were using top-tier Terran battle gear. Kira, however, had no such problem. In a single fluid motion, she somersaulted over the couch, her bare feet landing soundlessly behind the second mercenary. A small silver sphere materialized in her hand, one of the restraints that had once held her. She pressed it against the mercenary's armor, and the effect was instantaneous. The restraints reactivated, but instead of binding her, they locked onto the mercenary himself. The man convulsed, his armor systems shorting out, a strangled gasp escaping his throat before he collapsed. Dorian swore under his breath. She wasn't just quick, she was dangerous. The last attacker adjusted his aim, but before he could fire, Kira moved again. This time, she didn't just dodge, she vanished. A flicker of violet light, a ripple in the air, and suddenly she was behind him, her golden eyes burning like molten metal, her fingers curled, and a blade of shifting energy extended from her palm, silent, deadly, impossibly sharp. One precise thrust, and the mercenary crumpled to the floor. Silence filled the ruined suite, the only sound the distant wail of emergency sirens. Dorian exhaled sharply. Kira turned toward him, her golden eyes still blazing. "We need to leave. Now." No argument there. Dorian reloaded his pulse pistol, his wrist implant flashing with incoming alerts. More hostiles were on the way, at least a dozen. "We've got incoming," I noticed. She strode toward the shattered doorway, her steps silent despite the chaos. "There's a maintenance dock 3 floors down. We can reach it through." The ceiling detonated. Dorian barely had time to react before the entire suite shuddered. A shockwave knocked him off balance as a hulking figure crashed through the roof, sending debris scattering like shrapnel. A 7-foot armored enforcer stood in the wreckage, his massive exosuit humming with power. His helmet retracted, revealing a scarred human face beneath. "Kira." The man's voice was thick with amusement. "Didn't think I'd find you so fast." Kira's posture stiffened. "Rex Malroth." She spat the name like a curse. Dorian's grip tightened around his pulse pistol. He recognized that name. Ex-military, war criminal, and one of Marvin's personal attack dogs. This just kept getting better. "Marvin wants you alive," Malroth continued, stepping forward. The floor groaned under his weight. "But me, I don't care how many pieces you're in when I deliver you." His gauntlet hummed, and Dorian recognized the energy buildup. "Move," he barked. The blast came a second later. A wave of kinetic force tore through the room, shredding furniture and sending both Dorian and Kira flying backward. Dorian barely managed to twist midair, landing hard but rolling with the impact. Kira wasn't as lucky. She slammed into the glass window. It cracked. Malroth charged. Dorian fired twice, but the shots bounced off the exosuit's plating. Kira recovered fast, too fast. Before Malroth could close the distance, she twisted away, her fingers glowing with an unnatural violet energy. Dorian barely had time to process what he was seeing before she threw out her hand. The air rippled. Malroth froze. For a heartbeat, he didn't move. Then he grunted in pain, his massive suit faltering, his stance wavering. Dorian saw it now, the Kyrian gift. They weren't just warriors. They were something more. Malroth's veins pulsed, his face contorting as if something was crushing him from the inside. His suit's power flickered, the humming core sputtering. For the first time, Dorian saw fear in his eyes. "You!" Malroth gasped. "I remember you, Rex." Kira's voice was calm, steady, but there was an edge to it, a razor-thin line between mercy and retribution. Dorian didn't wait for her decision. He aimed for the exposed section of Malroth's armor and fired. The blast hit true. Malroth's body jerked, his suit overloading as energy cascaded through his nervous system. With a shuddering gasp, he collapsed. Silence. Then the alarm screamed. Dorian turned to Kira, breathing hard. "We really need to go." She nodded, wiping the stray trickle of blood from the corner of her lip. "Follow me." They didn't wait for the next wave. The two of them vanished into the corridors of the hotel, sprinting through emergency exits and narrow passageways meant for staff. Dorian's wrist implant was already scanning escape routes. One way out, a stolen ship, a dying empire, and a war they weren't ready for. But first, they had to survive the night. The flight from Xanthera. Dorian didn't stop running. Neither did Kira. They tore through the dimly lit back corridors of the Celestial Mirage Hotel, their footfalls barely audible against the hum of automated systems. Dorian's ocular implant displayed a real-time security feed, and it wasn't good. More mercenaries were pouring into the building, closing off exits, locking down escape routes. Marvin was throwing everything at them. Dorian gritted his teeth. They needed to get off-world. Fast. Kiera ran beside him, her movements eerily graceful, like a panther gliding through the darkness. Despite the battle that had just unfolded in his suite, she showed no signs of slowing down. That worried him. Service dock. 3 levels down. Kiera's voice was breathless but controlled. There's a suborbital transport pad. If we... A sudden explosion rocked the corridor. Dorian threw himself against the wall, shielding his face as the shockwave ripped through the passage, sending debris scattering. Fire suppression systems hissed, releasing plumes of white vapor. Through the smoke, figures emerge, more of Marvin's goons, their weapons glowing with ready-to-fire plasma rounds. Dorian's instincts kicked in. He grabbed Kiera's wrist, yanking her into an access hatch just as the mercenaries opened fire. The walls behind them melted under the searing heat. They hit the ground hard, rolling into a maintenance tunnel filled with exposed conduits and flickering emergency lights. New plan, Dorian muttered, rubbing his shoulder. Kiera adjusted herself, her golden eyes scanning the cramped space. I assume it doesn't involve waiting around to be incinerated. Dorian gave her a sharp look. I was thinking of stealing a ship. Kiera smirked. Now you're speaking my language. The hangar bay. The tunnel led them deeper beneath the celestial mirage, an underground labyrinth meant for staff and cargo transport. Dorian pulled up his map, his wrist implant interfacing with the hotel's security systems. One hangar was still unlocked, and one ship was unguarded. They emerged into the hangar bay, a massive underground dock carved into the city's lower structure. Towering cargo haulers and sleek shuttles were secured in their landing clamps, but Dorian's eyes locked onto a particular vessel. The Black Dawn, a small fast freighter modified for high-speed smuggling runs. It was exactly what they needed. Dorian started forward, but Kiera stopped him with a firm grip on his arm. Wait. She tilted her head, listening. Dorian heard it too. A low hum. A drone. They weren't alone. He barely had time to duck before gunfire erupted, bullets and plasma slicing through the air. They dove behind a cargo crate as mercenaries descended from upper walkways, their armor reflecting the eerie blue glow of the docking lights. How many? Dorian gritted his teeth, checking his ammo. Kiera peeked over the crate, then looked back at him. Too many. A familiar voice rang out. Dorian Kane, I expected better from you. Dorian's stomach tightened. A figure stepped forward from the mercenary ranks, his silver hair slicked back, a smug grin on his sharp features. Marvin. The man himself had arrived. Marvin strolled casually through the hangar, his black coat billowing behind him like some kind of intergalactic aristocrat. Behind him, more soldiers fanned out, weapons trained. Kiera tensed, her fingers twitching toward the small blade strapped to her thigh. Marvin's eyes landed on her, and his smile widened. Kiera, I see you're still difficult. Kiera's expression didn't change. You sound disappointed. Not disappointed, Marvin sighed. Just tired. I had such high hopes for you. Dorian's jaw clenched. So what's the plan, Marvin? Talk us to death. Marvin laughed. I don't need to. You're already dead. He raised his hand. A signal. The mercenaries opened fire. Dorian pushed Kiera down, rolling behind another cargo crate as bullets and plasma bolts shredded the ground where they had just been standing. No more talking. It was time to fight. A battle in the dark. Dorian fired first, his pulse pistol's energy rounds punching through armor, dropping 2 mercenaries before they could react. Kiera moved like a shadow, her liquid metal suit shifting, adapting to the battle. She darted forward, disarming one enemy with a single twist of her wrist, then drove her blade between his ribs with inhuman precision. Another mercenary swung a shock baton at her, but she spun away, grabbing his wrist and twisting, breaking it in a sickening snap. Dorian sprinted toward the ship, Kira right behind him. More mercenaries blocked the way. They were trapped. Marvin laughed, watching from above. Such a waste, Kira. His voice was almost sad. You could have had it all. You could have ruled. Kira's golden eyes flashed. I don't serve tyrants. She pressed her palm against the ground. A pulse of violet energy rippled outward. The mercenaries froze. Their bodies suddenly locked in place, as if an invisible force had seized them. Dorian stared. That wasn't just technology. That was Kyrian power. Marvin's smile disappeared. You shouldn't have done that. Kira didn't answer. She grabbed Dorian's wrist and pulled him toward the ship. They ran. The moment they reached the ramp, the ship's automated systems came to life, detecting its new passengers. Welcome, Captain. The onboard AI chimed. Dorian didn't have time to enjoy the title. Kira slammed her hand against the control panel, initiating emergency launch. The ship's engines roared. The hangar doors began to close. Marvin's voice echoed behind them. You can't run forever. The Black Dawn's thrusters ignited, and the ship shot into the sky, escaping through the hangar's narrowing gap. They had made it. For now. The Black Dawn's escape. The Black Dawn ripped through Zenthera Prime's artificial sky, thrusters burning white-hot as it punched through the dense traffic lanes of starships, cargo haulers, and high-speed transports. The city below shrank rapidly, its golden spires vanishing beneath a sea of clouds. Dorian gripped the ship's manual controls, his jaw clenched as alarms screeched around him. The vessel shuddered violently as he forced it into a steep climb, pushing its engines beyond their safety limits. Kira was already at the co-pilot station, her fingers flying across the console, attempting to override the ship's security lockdown. Incoming pursuit, she snapped. Dorian didn't need to check the sensors. He could feel it. Behind them, a squadron of pursuit drones launched from Zenthera Prime's orbital security grid, their sleek, black frames glinting in the artificial light. Marvin had called in the city's defense forces. Dorian cursed. Of course he had. How bad? He asked. 6 interceptor drones, high speed, high agility. Kira's golden eyes flickered over the readout. They'll be on us in 20 seconds. Dorian's hands tightened around the flight yoke. Then I'll have to lose them before they get a chance. He yanked the controls, throwing the Black Dawn into a sharp barrel roll, narrowly avoiding a barrage of pulse blasts from the drones. Kira clung to the edge of her seat. A little warning next time. Dorian smirked. Where's the fun in that? A battle in the void. The pursuit drones closed in, their weapon systems locking on to the fleeing freighter. Red targeting grids flashed across Dorian's holo display, warning of incoming fire. A second later, the void outside the cockpit lit up with a storm of energy bolts. Dorian jerked the Black Dawn into a steep dive, twisting between the incoming rounds as the ship screamed through Zenthera's upper atmosphere. I hope this thing has weapons, Kira shouted. Dorian gritted his teeth, flipping a toggle switch on the dashboard. It does now. The ship's hidden gun ports slid open, and twin plasma cannons emerged from the hull. Automated targeting systems spun online, locking onto the nearest drones. Dorian slammed the fire controls. The ship shook as blue lances of energy streaked toward the enemy drones, scoring direct hits on 2 of them. Both detonated instantly, consumed by fireballs that briefly illuminated the void. Kira let out a low whistle. Not bad. Don't celebrate yet. The remaining 4 drones adjusted their formations, splitting up to surround the Black Dawn. Dorian growled. Smart bastards. 1 drone swept to the left, its twin plasma turrets rotating to get a clear shot. Kira's eyes narrowed. Before Dorian could react, she slammed her palm onto the weapons control panel, overriding his input. The ship's ion cannon swiveled, tracking the drone before unleashing a pulse blast that struck the enemy ship mid-chassis. The drone's engine sputtered before it spiraled out of control, crashing into the wreckage of its destroyed comrades. Dorian raised an eyebrow. Kira grinned. You're not the only one who can fly. The jump to hyperspace. 3 drones left. Dorian's mind raced. The dogfight couldn't last forever. The Black Dawn wasn't built for extended combat. They needed an exit. He glanced at the navigation console. Give me a jump point. Kira's fingers flew over the console, her golden eyes flickering with lines of streaming data. Nearest safe jump coordinates are 5 sectors out. But what? We need at least 30 seconds to calculate a jump vector. Dorian cursed. They didn't have 30 seconds. One of the remaining pursuit drones accelerated, closing the distance. They're trying to disable our hyperdrive, Kira yelled. Dorian didn't hesitate. He threw the Black Dawn into a hard spin, forcing the drone to overshoot, then slammed the throttle forward, pushing the ship's engines to their absolute limit. The entire ship groaned in protest, but he held firm. The last 2 drones opened fire, their shots streaking past the hull inches from impact. Kira's console beeped rapidly. Jump calculations complete. Dorian punched the hyperdrive ignition. Outside the cockpit, the stars elongated into streaks of white light. The Black Dawn lurched forward, and with a final burst of acceleration, they vanished into hyperspace. The pursuit drones, mere milliseconds too late, were left drifting in empty space. Aftermath. The ship's interior lights flickered, adjusting to the change in velocity as they stabilized in the hyperspace corridor. For the first time in what felt like hours, Dorian allowed himself to breathe. The pursuit was over. For now. Kira sat back in her chair, running a hand through her obsidian black hair. That was exhilarating. Dorian scoffed. You call that exhilarating? She grinned. I did say I enjoyed near-death experiences. Dorian sighed, leaning his head back. Next time, let's try surviving without the near-death part. Kira smirked, but didn't argue. For a moment, they sat in silence, the soft hum of the ship's engines the only sound in the cabin. Then, finally, Dorian turned to her. All right, we got out. Now tell me, what the hell is really going on? Kira's expression darkened. You already know some of it. My people, the Kyrians, we didn't just disappear. We were betrayed. Dorian leaned forward. Betrayed by who? Kira's golden eyes burned with fury. Marvin. Dorian's pulse spiked. He had suspected it, but hearing her confirm it sent a chill down his spine. Kira continued, her voice steady but cold. He didn't just sell out my people. He's using Kyrian technology to rewrite the balance of power in the galaxy. He's looking for something. Something buried deep within the ruins of my homeworld. Dorian's stomach twisted. What is he looking for? Kira hesitated. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, The crown of Kyrian. Dorian frowned. What is it? Kira exhaled. It's not just a relic. It's the key to all Kyrian technology. The living neural interface capable of controlling our entire civilization's knowledge, weaponry, and secrets. Dorian's blood ran cold. Now it made sense. Marvin wasn't just after money or power. He was after control. And if he got his hands on that crown, he wouldn't just rule Xanthera Prime. He'd rule the entire damned galaxy. Dorian swore under his breath. Then we can't let him find it. Kira's golden eyes met his. Agreed. A tense silence filled the cockpit. Then Dorian smirked. Looks like we're going on a treasure hunt.